15 or 20,000 feet till in that spiral until I think simultaneously Bigler, the co-pilot, and myself discovered that the pilot's foot was not what was holding us in that attitude. It was the automatic pilot had been hit by the pilot's knee as it flopped open. There was a bar switch there that controlled I believe it was four switches, various attitude type switches, and that was holding us in that position. It was a mistake. It was a mistake that I should have corrected. We all should have corrected it before we ever took off. That it was the automatic pilot was holding us at any rate. I reached over and I knocked that switch off and got up in the pilot's seat, just leaving him down alongside of his seat, until we could get the ship going on out at low altitude. We were down into the smoke, the actual smoke, and some of the flames over Hamburg. When we headed north, just by the compass, just swung the airplane around, all the gunners were shooting madly at the fighters that were they always went after a lone B-17, any bomber alone. And we, at that low altitude of 1,800 or maybe 2,000 feet, we headed back over the North Sea and started our slow curve around to the west, across the North Sea and across the English Channel. We had lost two engines by then. One of them knocked out by flak, and I think one of them because of overusing the engine at too high a speed to try and get some speed for climbing. I guess we were about 15 or 16,000 feet when we were attacked by a twin-engine, very tenacious fighter, a German fighting plane that came at us and would dive from the front and from the sides, from above and from below, and just giving us a terrible time. Well, the co-pilot was having suffered from anoxia, the lack of oxygen, and that long ride down, was unable to fly the airplane completely. The Bombardier came up to help me to control the plane, and I had to step out and get into the turret to help knock out this twin-engine fighter. I think between the tail gunner and myself and the left waist gunner from the left side of the B-17, we were just shooting constantly. It's hard to tell who got the credit for it, but we did get credit for knocking down that airplane. Then it was a long trip back on two engines. We were slowly dropping till I ordered as engineer, I kept control of the weights and balance of the aircraft, the flying attitude, and I asked all the gunners to throw out their guns. We were in the English Channel or out near it then. Anything, boxes of ammunition, everything that had some weight. And it's a good thing we did, because within 30 minutes we had lost another engine. We were on one engine, as we could see the English coast off in the distance, and dropping fast. We were by then I think down to 4,000 or 5,000 feet. By the time we crossed the channel and entered over England, we were about 300 feet and just barely made it to our base. We thought we'd land at the first air base we came to, but we made it into our own base, and we were afraid of a crash, and so we sent up the red flares. I did to have fire engines and the ambulance ready. We made the landing all right, but I kind of fell apart, and I couldn't keep it with one engine. I just couldn't keep it on the runway. But the landing was okay. The Bombardier and the co-pilot and myself were all working at the landing. And I don't know why, but I just couldn't taxi the plane. None of us could. They sent aboard a crew to taxi it on off after they had taken out our pilot's body and some wounds that others of the crew members had had. So then the next day, the flight surgeon decided that we should all go have a rest from combat. They called it camp combat fatigue, shell shock, and a number of different words for it. And we were sent to a wonderful, delightful place on the west coast of England at Blackpool. It was operated by the Air Corps as well as the Red Cross. And we all seemed to recover and went back to flying just another couple of weeks. This is the story is written up on that mission coming back from Hamburg, of the three of us trying to get that airplane back from Hamburg. Well, three of us were awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross, and it was kind of ironic that odd that Cliff Erickson was the first one to get it, and we got the same medal for the same kind of action, bringing the airplane back. I was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross I mentioned. This was the official award. A few weeks after we got back, we were given an easy mission over Amiens, France. This is another important aerodrome of the Luftwaffe. And we flew as the lead airplane with our colonel, the commanding officer of our base, Colonel Preston, as our pilot. He was kind of checking us out as a crew to see how we handled ourselves after our rest period. And they made the co-pilot first pilot after this mission. The colonel approved him. On August 16th, in 1943, we were sent on a mission to Paris, France, the famous aerodrome of Le Bourget, which is in north-central France, right near Paris on the outskirts. But our bombing mission brought us across the north of France, across Belgium, and across the little country of Luxembourg, and were to bomb on the way back, coming toward the west coast. Well, we never made it. We were attacked by multiple squadrons. I know there must have been 75 or 100 aircraft, and the first ones they always would pick off were the B-17s that were flying like the high diamond position. The high diamond position is where the ordinary squadron, the wings, would be set out at angles like this. The high diamond is way up here on top of a flight of 4 airplanes. This carried through all the way down, stepping down through the various formations down to the very bottom, which also had a high diamond and a low diamond position. Well, that was the first place to become attacked, was up the high diamond. It was they had no problem in getting us to cut away from our squadron. The Bigler, our young 19-year-old co-pilot that had been made pilot, I don't know exactly, but I have the feeling that we tried to dodge some of those fighters coming in, which is a no-no. Our main way to stay alive was to stay in a close, tight formation. Don't get away from them. But for some reason or other, we were cut out of our big formation, and we were shot up real badly. We shot down 2 airplanes. I had one, and the tail gunner got another one. It was verified by our group, but we didn't get back to England from that. We had to leave our burning airplane. The cockpit was set afire. The reason being that the hydraulic fluid of the hydraulic accumulator under high pressure, which operated the hydraulic controls, the landing gear, the wing tips, the tail surfaces, the vertical stabilizer, that was shot up and spilled oil all over the floor of the wooden floor of the B-17. My chest pack, the parachute, was down there. Some of the oil was splattered on the co-pilot, and though it would break out into a spontaneous combustion, we didn't need flame to start it. The mere mixture of the oxygen that was shot up and the hydraulic fluid which was shot up caused flame. Everywhere that splattered, it would just break out into flame of its own accord. So we all bailed out. We just had to. There's no way to save the plane. We had 2 engines knocked out at that point, and some of the control surfaces on the tail were knocked out. The pilot and co-pilot were the first ones out because of being on fire. I yelled to them I'd open the hatch, and they'd get out real quick because of that fire on their clothes, just spotty on their flying clothes. At any rate, they all got out. I quickly made a run back to through the Bombay, and the intercom was out. I had to let the people in the back of the airplane know that we were bailing out, that we had to get out of the airplane quickly. Then I left, put on my chest pack. The little fire that was on my chest pack was not any great huge flame, but it was enough to singe off the side burns, the eyelids, eyelashes, and some of my hair. I didn't have any real severe burns on the face or hands. I didn't stop to think that at that altitude, which I don't recall, but must have been 25,000 feet or so, there's not enough oxygen to support flame. But in an exciting situation like that, you don't think too clearly. I didn't. I would have known that I could have made a delayed jump and the fire would have been out. But I didn't. I pulled my ripcord very soon after right immediately after I got out, because I didn't want that fire burning through into the nylon, into the fabric of the parachute. So as I pulled the ripcord, I felt first a bad bump. I don't know whether it was the Bombay doors I had hit with my head. I wasn't aware of the fact that I was injured in any way until I got down and out of the into the ground in the care of the French people. Coming down was a long experience. By then I felt pretty good pain in my left thigh, and my head. It had one or two blows. I think the first one was either the Bombay door or the horizontal stabilizer. The other one was when the parachute opened and one of the buckles hit me on the right side, right where I'd already been hit. Coming down was a long experience. It was almost 30 minutes in coming down. I'd been in the chute about 10 or 15 minutes when a German fighter, a Focke Wulf first, approached me, made a circle away around me, and I started pulling the shrouds of the parachute side to side to try, in case he was going to shoot me, I would want to be swinging, make a harder target for him. And as he approached real close, it looked like he may have made some shots. They looked like neon lights in the front of an fighter aircraft when they're shooting, and I thought I saw some of those. I didn't hear any. Anyway, he dove just right, or ducked right, just underneath me like that, and waggled his wings and made a salute and took off. He may have been radioing my position. I don't know. Another fighter plane came toward me when I was, just 4,000 or 5,000 feet above the forest that I was hoping to land in. And about the same thing. This was a Messerschmitt 110, a 109 that came at me. He, too, didn't shoot. It was obvious he didn't shoot. And he circled me. He just made one big 360-degree right around my parachute and almost vertical wings. And he too gave just a little salute like that, waggled the wings, and flew off. I was very grateful to be spared that experience of being shot at. I understand the Japs did a lot of that, but the Japanese pilots, but there were just a few reports of the German fighters doing that, shooting anybody in a parachute. As I got near the ground, I could see already some French German trucks coming through some little village. I wasn't sure where I was, whether I was in Luxembourg or Liechtenstein or France or Germany. I wasn't really sure. We couldn't see Paris at the point we left the ship. So I wanted to land, if I could, in a river I had spotted. I kept trying to aim. I couldn't remember which shroud you pulled to go left or right or front or back. We had never had any training in parachute jumping at all. And at an altitude like that, you can try slipping one way or the other, but you have no reference point to know which way you're slipping. So as I got real close to the forest and the river running through there, I just took a chance and gave a big thrust on the pull on my shroud lines, and I missed the forest entirely, not entirely, but missed the river entirely, and landed on the tallest tree right alongside of the river. And I was hung up there. I was knocked out. It couldn't have been too long before I came to, because I was still swinging in the parachute, hanging about 20-25 feet above the ground, and I couldn't reach any limbs to pull myself over to. I was desperate to get hidden as soon as possible, and there was just no way. My back was hurting badly. I think it was because of hanging in that parachute from an angle over here, hanging with my back arched backwards. Very uncomfortable, just painful all the way down, and I wasn't able to walk. I mean, I couldn't even swing that parachute much in that, just try and reach a limb. Eventually I heard a dog barking and some voices coming, and I just hoped and prayed that they wouldn't be Germans approaching me. And it didn't sound like Germans, but I wasn't sure. I was not too well versed in what French sounded like. But I guess within 5 or 10 minutes after I was down, a group of people started gathering below me. A dog barking first. The dog came first and seemed to guide the other people right to where I was hanging up in that tree. They spoke a lot of foreign words, words that I wasn't sure of. For instance, they said, Araman, Araman. I had no idea what that meant. Later I found it was German. They were asking if I were German. They couldn't tell from my clothes that I was wearing. I did understand enough through their sign language and all that I should drop some kind of identification. And they would say carta, like in your pocket, a carta, like a card or something to identification. The only thing I could think of was my boots, because they had the insignia, the Air Corps insignia on those rubber flying boots, leather flying boots. So I dropped one boot, and it seemed to say okay for them. They knew who I was, that I was an American flyer, and they started saying, American, American, and I knew what that word meant. It sounded good to me. So they set up a young fellow. They started cutting that boot up for souvenirs immediately. They sent up a young fellow. I found his name later. It was Pierre Cuvier. He climbed up the tree. I think he was 16 or 17 years old, but a good husky build, just a farm boy. He tossed me a short length of rope, and in sign language for me to tie it around my parachute gear, and he pulled me over to the tree, to the big limb that he was standing on. That's when I found out I couldn't stand, I couldn't walk, and it was a big question of how I was going to get out of that tree from 25 feet up or more. And he ended up cutting all that parachute paraphernalia off of me with his knife, with my knife. I had a hunting knife, which I gave to him. He put me over his shoulder and carried me in what I think we call in this country a fireman's carry, where I'm strung across and over his shoulders. And he carried me bodily out of a tree, a la Tarzan, I guess, down to the bottom. And I was starting to loosen up my leg, which was cramped, and I noticed he started saying the French word blessé, blessé, and pointing to my thigh. And I looked, and it was sure I'd been bleeding profusely down there. I hadn't known I'd been hit. That had been a blow, I guess, that I felt as almost like a cramp might be. Anyway, he got me down out of the tree, and immediately they said, allez, allez, run through the forest, and cache, hide. He took me to a place. He was helping me walk. I was able to walk a little bit, but with hanging my arm around his shoulders. And we ran. He found a little place in some boulders, some large 2 and 3 foot boulders that were, I don't know whether they'd been placed there by kids building a little fort or something out in the woods. But anyway, it was on a little rise in the ground, and that's where he hid me. Left the parachute for the other people to take care of, get out of the tree and hide it. And through sign language and my watch, he indicated that he had to go and that he would be back in 3 hours. It was about 12:30 then. The parachute ride was almost half an hour. And when he left, I just sat there, tried to relax myself, and hoped and prayed that I would have the experience which I'd anticipated. Really, I didn't want to be picked up and flown back. Once I was in France, I would like to see France, and more of it I could. The 2:30, about 2 or 2:30 in the afternoon, after being there for almost 2 hours in that hiding place, I heard coming through the forest a little weak sound that went something like this. And I recognized it as Yankee Doodle. And I put my head up to where I could see between some of those rocks, and I saw a little boy and a girl, judged to be roughly 10 or 12, a little boy, and the girl 13 or 14. So I identified myself by the same way. I didn't get out of that rocky place. I just whistled just a little bit of La Marseillaise, which I just happened to know. And they knew that it was safe to approach. They came with clothes wrapped around under their clothing. They'd come through the German lines, which I could hear forming on the outside of that forest, or on the perimeter of that forest. They had gotten through there just as farm kids looking for the lost American or Americans. They would, of course, be given I don't know what the award was, but that was a pretty good monetary award that they would earn from the Germans if they would turn us in. At any rate, they came in with all their clothes. My clothes were wrapped around underneath their clothes. The little girl was carrying a little basket, and she had a little wine and some cheese, and a piece of bread, and some of the clothes were under her skirt. And they sat down in that little hiding place with me as I slipped off my obvious American uniform and slipped into those clothes that they had brought. Just a simple lightweight shirt, short sleeve, a cotton, and light cotton pants. This, mind you, was in August. It was a summer. Paris and northern France can get a little warm, so I was comfortable with that. Then they left, and carrying the little basket with them so they could go out the same way they came in, I guess. About 3:30, Andre Cuvier came back. He didn't need any approaching signal at all, I guess. But I don't understand yet to this day how I got all of the message from sign language and little French words that I'd never heard before. But he gave me the impression that he wanted me to copy everything that he did. If he smoked a cigarette, I would smoke a cigarette the same way, by hanging off my lip. That's the way the French people in the rural part of the country did. So I practiced that for just a few minutes. Later on, he pulled up a weed, a tall weed of some kind, and stuck the end of it in my mouth. There again, as he had done. So he was preparing me for getting out of there, being another French farmer looking for the Americans. That's the way we got out of the place. We started by circling the forest, inside the brush, a little bit visible to the Germans that were going round and round in the forest with motorbikes, little scooter type of things, as well as motorcycles, Jeep-like cars. We were just stepped out in a wide open, right in back of some other French people that were going around and slowly walking and looking into the forest, looking for the Americans, supposedly. And I think that these people had gotten together earlier in the war and devised this method of getting people out of there. They were looking like they were cooperating with the Germans by helping look for the Americans. And they knew that somebody was going to bring out the American and that he was going to successfully escape due to their efforts. After we had circled the forest right and back with the Germans and the other French people, we just shrugged shoulders. He did first, and then I did. Put your hands up and shrug, and started just slowly sauntering across the farm fields. We kept close to a ditch, a drainage ditch that was going over to another little forest, so that we could maybe jump in if we had to and run down in that ditch. He took me to a place that I think he was explaining to me World War I, these trenches, World War I trenches that were still there on the edge of the farmland. And I hid there until nightfall with him. Later on, after the German curfew of 10 o'clock, Andre Cuvier took me to his place in the outskirts of that little village. It was a four-story narrow building, a typical farmhouse for that area. The bottom floor was where the cattle and the chickens were in that part of the compound. Above that were their living quarters, the next two floors. The third floor really top floor was an attic, and that's where Andre and his mother and his sister escorted me up to that attic and hid me in some a bunch of rags and stuff they had up there. And I tried to go to sleep. I guess it was 12 or 12:30 when the house quieted down. No lights had been on, of course. The 2 or 3 hours passed. I hadn't been asleep, but all of a sudden I hear these German sirens on their trucks, their police cars, and all this. They go boo, 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 boo. A very frightening sound for me later on in my escape. But that was bad enough. Andre came up. It was about 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning. He came up the top floor of the attic and signaled for me to follow him. And we went out. We had no light. It was just working in the dark for me to go out the window with him, and went down a ladder that's attached to the house down to the where we had to jump off and into a haystack. And I thought we were going to hide there, but no, Andre took me up through the ditches, drainage ditches, the edge of the farmland. I guess 4 or 5 miles. It was a long time walking in the dark like that. Finally, he brought me into a cave on the side of a hill, a few miles from the village, and there he hid me and stayed with me that. In the morning, I had a chance then to look around the cave when it got daylight, and had a little luck there. There were mushrooms growing in there and in trays that some farmer had gotten started. There were a couple of shelves of homemade beer that were there curing, and a few bottles of wine, a case or two of wine, and I had some of each for my breakfast. And I noticed the pain was increasing in my left thigh. I took a look down there let my pants down a little bit and looked, and some of those places in my thigh were festering. I knew that something had to be done. When Andre woke up, he said he would send something out with the little girl and the little boy. They came a few hours later after he went to get them. They came back with the little boy had a knife, kind of rusty, and the girl had a new bottle, a little small can of ether. She would drip the ether on the places as I was cutting on my thigh, on my leg, and we got about out of the 17, I think we got something like 15 or 16 of the places out. Now probably a few less, because years later, the Veterans Hospital took out about three more pieces. At any rate, I was able to get all of those with the knife after I'd polished it on some rocks and sand. The little girl had to cut one of them out on my right hand, on the palm, and seemed to have cleared up. I didn't have any trouble with that for the rest of the time I was in France and Spain. The mayor of the village came out later on that first day, and of all things, he brought with him my Bombardier.